The rotation was injured last year, the bullpen was bad last year, and those two things are more connected than you realize. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Tuesday, November 25th, your source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball. You can follow the show on X, Braves_today. We have a Facebook page and an Instagram as well. And you can find all my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're probably part of the Believe Podcast Network, presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app today or go to FanDuel.com to get started. A little bit later in the show, we've got a listener question about the new TV deals and how it impacts the Braves. And I think for the most part, it's good news. We'll get to that in the third segment. But before we do that, I got a listener question. I apologize, I can't remember who it was, asking about the fact that the Mets were so incredibly injured on their pitching staff last year, and then us bringing in their pitching coach. Were we just going to make our injury issues worse? And this obviously is a big deal. You could argue that as bad as the offense struggled in the first half, the pitching staff getting hurt in the second half of the season was really what wiped out the season, right? Like Atlanta was in a hole early from the 0-7 start and the offense struggling, but they've dug out of that hole before, especially when the offense started to turn around. And then they lost the entire rotation. It was just too much. And if you remember, like, all 5 members of the opening day rotation were on the 60-day IL at the same time. It's literally a historic level of injuries. Okay. Reynaldo Lopez misses the whole season with shoulder surgery. AJ Smith-Shawver goes down in late May with what ends up being Tommy John surgery. Chris Sale goes down in mid-June with what ends up being a fractured rib cage that he suffers on a defensive play, trying to get a complete game. Spencer Schwellenbach goes down 10 days later with a fractured elbow that he believes was caused by his attempt to up his average fastball velocity to close to 100 miles an hour. And then Grant Holmes goes down with a partial UCL tear in July. Late July, is attempting non-surgical rehab, and we believe, AA talked about this last week, we believe everything is going well and he might be able to pitch again in 26. But for as bad as we feel like we had it, and there was a couple reliever injuries in there as well. Joe Jimenez obviously missed the year. Deisabel Hernandez had 2 shorter stints, a forearm inflammation and a shoulder inflammation. Aaron Bummer missed the last month and change with a shoulder inflammation. But like for the most part, the Braves were pretty healthy in the bullpen, and the Mets were not. When you look at what New York did, it was frankly kind of absurd for injuries. They were already dealing with a lot of rotation stuff. Sean Manaea missed 108 games. Prospect Christian Scott, Tommy John surgery with an internal brace. He missed most of the season. Kodai Senga went down a little bit. Paul Blackburn, I believe they were using him as a starter. He dealt with knee inflammation and a shoulder impingement. But the bullpen really kind of bore the brunt of this. The Mets sent 6 different pitchers for elbow surgery last year. 5 of them were Tommy John. And then the 6th was flexor tendon surgery. That was Max Kranick. And all but one of those guys, I believe, were starters. Tyler Amigo, Reed Garrett, Max Kranick, Daniel Nunez, Danny Young, and Frankie Montas. And then AJ Minter also had a lat strain that needed season-ending surgery. And so again, 5 Tommy Johns in one season. 6 elbow surgeries, plus a lat strain that needed surgery. And the Mets, according to, I think it was The Athletic, had never had more than 3 Tommy John surgeries in a single calendar year at the major league level. Prospects are in a different boat here. And I think if I remember right from getting the question, the impetus for the question was Adam Ottavino, former Mets pitcher. He now, because he's retired, he now has a podcast. He's a former athlete. It's called Baseball and Coffee. If I remember right how it works, he does a live stream and then his editors go in and like chop up clips and stuff. But he was talking about the Mets bullpen issues and the injuries back there. And what should be comforting to Braves fans, he didn't lay the cause of it or the blame for it. There you go. Better way to say that. He didn't lay the blame for it on the feet of Jeremy Hefner, the pitching coach. He laid the blame for it at the feet of Carlos Mendoza, the manager. Quote, there's a lot of pressure on a lot of guys to play even when they feel a little compromised. And the manager, talking about Mendoza, I think he is a really good under the stress manager. I think he has no idea what he's doing when it comes to bullpen guys and how to keep them healthy or even how to care about them at all. There's no communication there. There's no feel there. There's no bedside manner when guys get hurt. And then he kind of goes on and talks about like how much that bothers him as a former pitcher, and to the point where he says if he was in New York, a bunch of those guys would have been healthy because he would have protected them. Side note here, this is a very common criticism of rookie managers, which Carlos Mendoza, this is his first big league managing job, especially guys who were not pitchers in the past. And it feels like more of, not all, but a lot of your managers come from the catching ranks and the position player ranks maybe than the pitching ranks, either starting or relieving. And it's just guys that I've talked to who have been in big league bullpens, it's different. And you don't really know how hard it is for those guys to pitch on back-to-back days or 3 out of 4 days or go out there and adrenaline dump to get out of an inning, get out of a jam, and they ask you to go back for one more. And so this is a very common complaint. Bullpen usage and bad bullpen usage is the number one issue you always hear about with rookie managers. And so part of me is a little glad that Walt Weiss hopefully got a lot of this out of his system in Colorado so that he doesn't have these issues with the Braves next year. And Ottavino, in the YouTube comments of the live stream, when somebody asks about how much of this is on Jeremy Hefner, goes out there and says that like those two guys were not on the same page, presumably when it comes to pitcher usage. So he doesn't think that it is because of Jeremy Hefner that these injuries happen. He thinks it's Carlos Mendoza, meaning we shouldn't be too concerned about it coming over from the Mets to the Braves. The Braves are going to have injuries in the pitching staff. Every team does, every single year, because the worst thing you can possibly do when it comes to pitching for your arm and your body is pitch. It's not a very consistent, it's not a very natural movement to do it with as much force and intensity as they do time and time and time again. And in the case of relievers, multiple days, back-to-back days, 3 out of 4, or 3 straight sometimes. We've seen Raisel Iglesias be a little shaky in that third outing in 3 days, but Atlanta needed the save, and that's who they went with. So it's tough. And when you kind of go back and look, the Mets didn't really do anything kind of egregious. Like they were in the bottom third for number of guys making relief appearances on consecutive days. You know, being in the bottom third is better, right? That means they did it less often. They didn't really push a lot of those guys to like 70 innings, although if they're getting hurt, it's hard to do that. They didn't really overuse guys like, 14 times a month or, throwing 15 innings in a month or things like that. They didn't really overload a lot of that stuff. But there are individual issues you could see, right? Like AJ Minter came off of hip surgery. They used him 13 times in the first 27 games of the season. Max Kranick hadn't pitched in the majors in a couple of years because of injuries and minor league stuff. And he was on a crazy pace when he went down. Drew Smith, the last game he pitched in was he had pitched 4 times in the previous week. And then Edwin Diaz gets thrown out. So he goes in and finishes that inning for Edwin Diaz. It's his 5th appearance of the week. And then he's not pitched since. So, there is there is some individual stuff there, but on the whole, the numbers for the Mets weren't that bad. And really, there's a connection here between the injuries to your rotation and how your bullpen performs. And I think that there's a path here for Atlanta to maybe adjust how they approach adding talent in the bullpen. I'll elaborate on that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Encase Cards, custom card manufacturer. I love these folks. You upload your source photo of whatever you want it to be. Maybe it's your wedding photos. Maybe it's your kids' youth sports. Whatever it is. You choose the text. You choose the holographic options. Give them an idea of what you want for your background. Their designers get to work. They design your card front and back. You guys go back and forth to perfect the design. And then they print out a high-quality cardstock, they slab it, and they put it in the color plastic case that you choose that has a built-in stand so you can display it at your home, your office, wherever you want it. Go to ncasecards.com, N-C-A-S-E, cards.com. Use promo code BRAVES today to get 20% off your order. Again, website's ncasecards.com, N-C-A-S-E cards.com, promo code Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby, and I want to kind of elaborate on some of the connection here because I've noticed for a while, we've talked about this on the show. I remember writing a newsletter about this like a year ago or 9 months ago or whatever, about how the Atlanta Braves under Alex Anthopoulos have been willing to spend money on the bullpen, and that the bullpen hasn't really been, like, it wasn't really that good this year. You didn't really get the money worth it, right? Atlanta had a 4.19 ERA, which was the 19th in baseball. So they were below average in ERA. 62% of their save opportunities converted, that was below average as well. And this is despite having the number 4 bullpen by cost in baseball. Spot Track had the Braves for 25 at $26.63 million. And that figure does not include Joe Jimenez because he did not pitch at all in the year. The only pricier bullpens than that, the Dodgers at $32.4 million, the Mets at $32.9 million, and the Reds at just under $37 million. Although theirs is skewed by the fact that Nick Martinez had a $21 million qualifying offer, but they used him in relief, right? He was kind of a swingman. He made some starts, but kind of like a glorified opener more so than a full starter, pitched in relief a lot at a $21 million price tag. It was nuts. And those bullpens weren't very good either. LA's bullpen was 21st. They mostly stuck to just using their starters in relief in the postseason. I remember World Series games where they would pitch 9 or 10 innings, and I think maybe 1 inning, 3 outs were covered by an actual reliever. Everything else was covered by Roki Sasaki, a starter, out of the pen. Clayton Kershaw, a starter, out of the pen. Tyler Glasnow pitched them in relief in the postseason. Emmett Sheehan's a starter, and he was in relief in the postseason. They were throwing their extra starters in there because they didn't trust their bullpen. New York's bullpen, 15th in ERA in baseball. The Reds were 14th in ERA. So, all of that money did not translate into having the best bullpen in baseball. And part of the reason for that is bullpen statistics bullpen performance really is so incredibly, I'm not going to say fluky, but influenced by random chance. Okay? And it's because of the sample sizes here. All right, so let's use Raisel Iglesias as an example. Okay? He's one of the best relievers in the National League since he's been with the Braves. Okay, so he debuted for the Braves in August of 2022. They acquired him from the Angels in the first year of his deal that he signed with the 4-year deal he signed with them. And in that stretch, 2.35 ERA. It's the lowest of any National League reliever who has as many appearances in that same time frame. But when Atlanta took him out of the closing role in mid-June of this year, that's because he was bad. When they took him out, he had a 6.75 ERA. He had blown 4 saves, and he had taken 5 losses. Here's the problem with that stretch of time, right? He faced a total of 108 batters in that time span. Chris Sale faced 110 batters in his first 5 starts of the year. It's just such a small sample size that a but random chance can work for you or against you and skew things, right? Okay. In Raisel Iglesias' Braves career leading into 2025, he had given up a total of 3 home runs on sliders. The first half, just until June, when he came out of the closer's role in 2025, he gave up 5 on sliders. He went from 3 in 3+ seasons to 5 in the span of 100 batters faced. It's fluky. It's just a couple bad locations, a couple good swings, the wind blowing the right way, and all of a sudden, he's blown the ERA for seemingly the entire season. And then he kind of flipped a switch, right? The final, in 31 games in the second half, he allowed 6 total runs. 4 of them were in one of his first games out of the break against the Yankees. From that first game against New York through the end of the season, he allowed a grand total of 2 runs in 28 2/3 innings. And that was only 103 batters. And the problem here is so many of the conventional statistics that we use to evaluate catchers. Why did I say catchers? That we use to evaluate pitchers. I'm thinking about managers, I guess, and how managers are often catchers. So many of the statistics we use to evaluate pitchers don't statistically stabilize. The math does not stabilize on how much they can vary until your sample size is much larger than these that we're talking about. And there's a few of them that are pretty quick. Strikeout rate takes about 70 batters for your strikeout rate to be in a pretty good range of where it's going to remain, provided you stay healthy. But even then, Raisel Iglesias didn't get to 70 batters faced until mid-May. Walk rate takes 170 batters to roughly stabilize. He didn't face his 170th batter until July 26th. Right before the trade deadline. For those of you who are actual mathematical statistical nerds, we're not going to go into the math on this show. People have asked me to stop doing that. But when I say statistically significant and stabilize, I'm talking about an R-squared value of 0.49. Once you hit that threshold, that is kind of what we're considering to be that this individual statistic has stabilized. And again, 70 batters faced for strikeout rate, 170 for walk rate. That's really small compared to what some of these are, right? Batting average takes 630 batters for the batting average allowed to stabilize. Slugging takes 550 at-bats. Your ground ball rate takes 70 balls in play. Your line drive rate takes 650 balls in play. And it's because of how often these things happen. Ground balls and fly balls are more frequent than line drives. So it takes a lot larger sample to have enough line drives for it to be statistically significant. Your home run rate is 1,320 batters faced. Raisel Iglesias, since he's been in Atlanta, has faced only 856 batters. So his home run rate that we're looking at now in Atlanta technically is not even statistically significant yet. It can still change. And we saw that early in the year. We said Raisel Iglesias has a homer problem. No, he doesn't. Raisel Iglesias had some bad luck. And what happened in the second half of the season? His bad luck turned into good luck. Is he a guy that would allow 2 home runs all year? Probably not. His best year in 2024, he allowed 4. Is he a guy that would allow 15 in a year? No, but that's what he was on pace for in the first half of 25. So it's really hard to evaluate these guys based on the conventional statistics. And the other big thing here, and kind of what I'm alluding to when I said these things were connected, is so much of the bullpen performance is predicated on the rotation's performance. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? The more innings the rotation covers, the less innings the bullpen has to cover. But also, if you're looking at the bullpen as a whole, the more innings the rotation covers means the better of the relievers you have to cover those bullpen innings. If your starter's giving you 6 innings every night, you don't have to pitch your 4th best reliever. The first guy you're putting in the game is your 3rd best reliever, followed by your setup man, followed by your closer. If your starter goes 5, you're throwing somebody bulk innings, or you're going to 4 or 5 guys out of the pen, right? If he goes short, if it's 2 or 3 or 4 innings, you're throwing a lot of relievers, and you're exposing lower quality relievers to game situations and to at-bats and plate appearances where things can go wrong. And when you look at how many innings some of these bullpens faced, it makes a lot of sense. Atlanta's bullpen actually didn't have a ton of innings they had to cover. They threw 572 innings, which was actually a bottom 10 mark as far as fewest innings that they had to throw. The number 1 bullpen for innings thrown, Los Angeles Dodgers. Remember how I said they weren't very good? They threw the most innings of any bullpen in baseball. 28th on the list, the New York Mets. They threw the 3rd most innings of any bullpen in baseball. There is a connection between being able to run your starters deeper into games and getting better performance from an ERA perspective out of your bullpen. The Braves had the 3rd best bullpen ERA in 2024. Like, Guardians were a tier better than everybody else, and then Milwaukee, and then Atlanta. Atlanta's bullpen threw the 3rd fewest innings in baseball. Because what was the story of 2024? The offense was bad, right? Because everybody was hurt. But the pitching was phenomenal. The starting pitching was phenomenal. And so because of that, your bullpen had to cover less innings, so they did it with better relievers. This year, you lost some of those relievers. You lost Minter, you lost Holmes out of that bullpen. Jesse Chavez got old. And then you combine that with the fact they had to cover more innings, and you had some bad luck for guys like Iglesias with those homers off the sliders. Some bad luck for guys like Pierce Johnson, who gave up some very ill-timed home runs and in base hits, especially in San Francisco, blew 2 straight wins. And some bad luck on home run rate with guys like Dylan Lee, who in the second half of the year gave up way too many home runs. And Atlanta's bullpen wasn't nearly as good. The thing that I'm trying to get here, and I made a lot more eloquent case over on the newsletter, BravesToday.com, and it's a crazy title. It said, "Paying relievers is dumb and the Braves should stop doing it." In the piece, I'm arguing Atlanta does not need to go chase a big name who will take a big contract to slot into the bullpen. Because yes, while it's true that some relievers are better than others, Raisel Iglesias, compared to his peers, is better than most of the relievers in the National League. I gave you the stat earlier. Nobody with as many appearances as him since he's been in Atlanta in the National League has a lower ERA. But for the most part, good relievers can very easily have bad years. We saw Iglesias have a bad half a year. We saw Devin Williams have a bad entire year in New York. And so rather than pay big money to what we think is a proven name, when we've seen they can be bad at the drop of a hat. Maybe instead, go find stuff. Save a little bit of money. I'm not saying go sign a bunch of minor league guys, but I'm saying Joel Payamps was a good pickup for a couple $1,000,000 because his stuff is still good. He's been good up until last year. It's very likely that last year was a statistical outlier and that it's going to regress back to the mean and his performance will naturally improve this year. Hunter Harvey, provided he's healthy, that's a free agent who has really good stuff plus of 106. He's got a 4-pitch arsenal. 3 of them are above average, with 2 of one's a 113, that's a splitter. His slider's a 123, which is 2 standard deviations above average on stuff plus. You want to trade for a guy? Call the Angels. Ryan Zefferjon, top 20 stuff plus mark. 3 fantastic pitches, all better than 110, and a changeup that exists that he knows not to throw more than once or twice a game. But rather than paying money for guys that have been good in the past, since in relief, it's so much less likely that they're going to consistently repeat that year after year, go get guys that are cheaper, that have the stuff to be good, and then reuse that money you saved towards things like shortstop. Go sign a Ha-Sung Kim. Go also get a big bat. Give me Ha-Sung Kim and Ryan O'Hearn. Ryan O'Hearn can play corner outfield. He can slot in DH along with Ronald Acuña Jr. and Jurickson Profar. You'll still have at-bats for Baldwin. You'll still have at-bats at DH for Sean Murphy against lefties or whatever. Someone's going to get hurt. Give me one extra guy now so that we have a full lineup when somebody gets hurt. It's going to happen. It happens every year. The last 2 seasons, you've had to cover every defensive position because a guy's been out but first base. Mauricio Dubon can cover every defensive position but catcher if somebody gets hurt. So give me another bat so I have one extra bat. And then when a guy gets hurt, you still have a full dangerous 1 through 9. And the money for that is going to come from not giving bullpen relievers $9 and $10 million to be a 7th inning guy. That's all I'm saying. It's a much more eloquent and in-depth argument over on BravesToday.com. Go subscribe. Go check it out. In just a minute, I got a listener question about the new media deals that MLB announced last week. What it means for Braves fans and what it means for the sport as a whole. I think it's good stuff. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay Crosby. I made a joke about this last week, but the Falcons actually won. I was talking about how I can't believe the Falcons are favored to beat the Saints in Atlanta. And my fault, I didn't check what happened after Michael Penix left. I didn't check to see if they were still favored. But okay, they're favored to beat the Jets by 2.5 this weekend. And a small little part of me, you beat the Saints, a small little part of me starting to believe. If you also believe, go to FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app. It's Braves Today sponsor FanDuel Sportsbook. We love what they do over there. Go download the app, go to FanDuel.com, and go check it out. As of time of recording, 2.5-point favorite for the Falcons in New Jersey against the Jets. Over under of 39.5. All right, so I got a question via email. I want to say it was on Sunday about MLB's new TV deals. They announced a little while back that they had sold the rights to some games to 3 different places. ESPN still has some games. NBC/Peacock has some stuff, and Netflix has some stuff. And so what does this mean for Braves fans who want to watch the Braves? And what does this mean for the sport as a whole? That was the request. That's what I was asked to answer. I've done some reading. I've talked to some people that I've had on the podcast before. Podcasts, not this one, like Evan Drellich of The Athletic, things like that, back on the Prospect Pod. And kind of ask some questions to make sure I kind of understand. So the deals that were announced last week, ESPN has ownership now, ownership, distribution, whatever, of MLB.TV. So I'm a subscriber to MLB.TV. I watch the Braves, but I watch everything. I watch the entire sport, right? So ESPN will be the distributor of that starting next year. They hinted it would be the same price. I don't know if you would need an ESPN subscription to then pay the MLB.TV subscription. I'm curious to see whether or not the discounts remain. T-Mobile customers should still get it free for a year. I am a member of the MLB Players Association, like a supporting member. We get discounts on MLB.TV. I'm hoping that still works next year. We'll find out later in the year. But they have rights to out-of-market games for all 30 teams through MLB.TV, and the 6 clubs that are distributed by MLB will now be distributed by ESPN because that's part of MLB.TV. It's like, I think the Diamondbacks, the Rockies, the Twins, the Guardians, there's 2 others, Padres, and somebody else. MLB produces and distributes those games themselves, and they sell in-market packages. NBC and Peacock is getting the first round of the playoffs. They're also getting Sunday Night Baseball. Netflix is going to get the new standalone opening day game. So rather than having the traditional start day where everybody plays on either the first 2 days of the year, there will be one game in prime time on opening day, and then everybody else will start playing the next day. That exclusive game, that one game, the very first game of the year, will be on Netflix. They're also going to get the Home Run Derby. They're not going to get the All-Star Game, but they're going to get the Home Run Derby, and they're going to get the Field of Dreams game, which was announced. It's coming back. It's back this year. The whole reason this happened, let me slander Rob Manfred real quick. Rob Manfred screwed up. This is why this happened. When MLB and Major League Baseball and ESPN signed that 7-year, almost $4 billion contract a couple years ago, MLB insisted that they get an opt-out for the final 3 years, that they could tear the contract up early and take the rights back. ESPN said, okay, if you get one of those, that's fine. We want one of those too. MLB said yes. ESPN used it. ESPN backed out of the last 3 years of the deal, which was Sunday Night Baseball, the Home Run Derby, and the first round of playoff games. And ESPN over the next 3 years was supposed to pay $1.65 billion for that. First round of the playoffs, the Home Run Derby, and Sunday Night Baseball. And instead, those games, all of those things that were given up by ESPN are add up with NBC and Peacock and Netflix to about $750 million. So $900 million less than they were supposed to get. Rob Manfred just lost it. And then to make up some of the money, they sold the MLB.TV package or ownership of that, as well as the in-market rights to those 6 teams and the 30 weekday regular season games to get that $1.65 million back. So MLB is now whole. MLB has all of that money that they sacrificed by letting the ESPN opt out, but they instead also now don't have MLB.TV. So they came out worse in this. But, so for Braves fans, you're not going to need Netflix unless Atlanta's not in the Field of Dreams game. They're not the opening day game. You're not going to need Netflix unless you want to watch the Home Run Derby. NBC and Peacock, you're going to be in Sunday Night Baseball. Hopefully, you're going to be in the postseason in the first round. But you may not need to subscribe to those because you'll have they have the trials and all of that stuff. You can hopefully get around that. ESPN is going to be hard. Like, if you're not in market, you're going to need MLB.TV. You're going to have to do business with ESPN to get it. The reason why I'm optimistic about all of this, though, and for those of you who are still here, thank you. We're about to get in a little bit of the business stuff here, but thank you for still being here. The reason I'm optimistic about this whole deal and everything, is all of this stuff that ESPN has done. These all have the same end dates. All of these rights for everything come back up for the 2028 season. MLB is going to be trying to resell and find new partners for all of this stuff in 2028. A new broadcast situation. And so because of that, it really feels like if they're smart, and I'm not saying Rob Manfred is, but if they're smart, they do everything in their power to not miss games in 2027 because of the lockout. We're going to have a lockout. And let's be clear, I've said it before, a lockout is put in place by the owners. If the players initiate a work stoppage, it's called a strike. If the owners initiate a work stoppage, it's a lockout. So they've already said they're going to lock out the players as a negotiating tactic. They admitted that on the record months ago. But now, unlike the last time this happened, I genuinely feel like MLB, if they're smart, will understand if they miss actual games, it's going to significantly hurt them when they're trying to sell all of those media rights for 2028. Because this will be the first time that MLB has had all of the streaming rights in market available. Which means if they do everything right, we could get rid of blackouts. We could get rid of blackouts by the 2029 season. But if there's a work stoppage, and if we miss games, if we lose games, if fans go away, if the ratings drop, if the interest drops, that will absolutely decimate the value of their rights as they're trying to negotiate deals. So I don't like the whole idea of, yes, there's more places you have to subscribe to watch games. You didn't have to have a Peacock subscription before to watch Braves games. Now you probably will, because they'll have Sunday Night Baseball. And the Braves will be on it. They're on it every year. But the saving grace is that when that lockout happens, because it's going to happen, the owners have already said it's going to happen. When that lockout happens, we shouldn't miss regular season games. And hopefully, things are in a better, more sustainable place going forward. Now, I don't know what that looks like. We'll have a lot of conversations, probably next offseason when they're doing a labor action, to talk about what that looks like. But the big takeaway here, the big thing that more people than just me, smarter people than just me, have pointed out here, is that MLB has every incentive to not try and railroad everything they want past the players. Because if the players fight back with any resemblance of reasonable resistance to MLB trying to railroad a new CBA through, and they happen to miss games, it's going to hurt on the back end when these media deals are negotiated. So, I feel a little better because, one, you don't have to get Netflix if you don't want to. And if you're local and you have it either on cable or on streaming through FanDuel Sports Network, you don't have to get ESPN either. You just have to get Netflix if you want the Home Run Derby. But I'm also hopeful that we won't lose games going forward because MLB screwed up. Rob Manfred cost himself about $1 billion here. Because either he would have had that money without having to sell MLB.TV, or he would still have MLB.TV. He cost himself like $1 million. So, again, I'm not saying he's smart because he hasn't shown he is all the time, but I'm hopeful that this is going to end up being a good thing, and thankfully we won't need to pay for too much more subscription services just to watch the Atlanta Braves. This has been Braves Today for Tuesday, November 25th. Sorry for how long this is. Okay, end up going long this week. Do me a favor, if you're listening on audio, a 5-star review would be awesome. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, when we drop extra episodes, shorts, all that stuff. Leave a comment down below. Helps the algorithm, helps us grow the show. We had a fantastic November so far. I kind of want to keep it going. And as always, bravestoday.com. Your subscriptions, free or paid, help us out a ton. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.